Chapter 48. Good old ballistic weapons. Tenna is being tortured. Trig's statement hung over the CIC, where both R4 and Vigilo mercenaries were having their morning meetings. "This is the telepath kid, right?" said Commander Mikab. "He's a resonant." And yes, Panico replied. Trig raised his voice to get everyone's attention. "Did anyone hear me? Alex Camber is torturing Tenna. We have to move faster. Is there a way we can move on the Caldorix now? We can't afford to wait anymore." "There is," Captain Cantor said, "but it will involve taking more risks. We'll have to tell the Eventide Volunteer to stop taking on cargo containers right now. They've only got about 65% of what we need. And don't forget, we have to eliminate those escort vessels before moving on to the rescue. If you want to push things, we'll have to skip the part where we dump Tenna's new stalker at a starbase. He'll just have to stay in the brig for the whole ride." Fine, I don't care," Trig said. "Let's go, we're wasting time." One of Hanakon's men shrugged. "We can keep that idiot in line," he said. "Don't worry about him." A few hours later, the Eventide Volunteer emerged from a gateway in the Nethupa star system, just one hyperlane away from the Nagyari border and 3 jumps away from the Ferris faucets. The Resonance Cascade flew out of the Volunteer's cargo bay and started burning in one direction while Volunteer set a course for a nearby asteroid field. In the CIC, Tactical Officer Rulan, Anfel, Glossum, Selborn, and Trig examined a map of the system. "This is the shortest route to the Ferris faucets," Rulan began. "Caldorix and her escorts will enter the system from this hyperlane, then do a slingshot maneuver around this gas giant here to gain speed, and head for the hyperlane to Garia. All told, it'll take about 20 days for them to cross the system and get to the next hyperlane. We can deploy a ballistic barrage here." Rulan tapped a point on the hologram about 2 degrees above the ring system, in high orbit over the gas giant. He launched into an explanation. "But there's a risk. In order to score a hit, we'd have to give up our biggest advantage, which is the fact that we are days ahead of the enemy in their flight path right now. If we fire the ballistic barrage too early, the shots will scatter too much and be useless. I've calculated that we'll need to fire our guns about 15 hours before the enemy actually arrives. That'll give us time to move out of the way, and the barrage will still be reasonably accurate. Of course, they could change their flight path, in which case we'd miss completely. Or they might change formation. We could accidentally hit Caldorix itself. Trig, do you understand that if we do this, there's a chance we might accidentally kill Tenna?" Trig swallowed hard, then nodded. "We have to do something," he said, "and this should at least force them to slow down and buy time for the Eventide Volunteer to finish preparations." The Resonance Cascade moved into position, about 150,000 kilometers above the cloud tops of the nearby gas giant, just above a complex system of planetary rings. Flying high over the flat plain of dust, rock, and ice, Trig, Rulan, and Captain Cantor took their seats in the cockpit while the other mercenaries manned the weapon systems. "This is going to require very precise timing," Rulan told everyone. "Do not fire your weapons until I give the word, and not a moment before." Trig twitched the RCS controller, angling the cascade until all 6 of her Sea-Whiz cannons were aimed at the same distant point in space. "Remember, completely empty your magazines," Rulan said. "I want a nice, dense birdshot pattern." Bronley's voice sounded over the radio. "The shipping label on the ammo cans says these things are only good up to 5 kilometers. Rulan scoffed and replied, "These guns are reliably accurate to 5 kilometers, Bronley. Space is empty. When we fire these ballistic rounds, they'll keep going until they hit something. We're just going to weaponize gravity and momentum to increase our long-range accuracy. Once the cascade was in position, a painful waiting game began. Trig felt beads of sweat building up all over his body, forming little globes instead of running down his body because the ship was currently in 0G. On one of the cockpit panels, Rulon had rigged up a simple countdown timer, ticking away the seconds until the crucial moment. T minus 30 seconds, Rulon counted down. Ponico, Selborn, Anfel, Bronley, Kara, and Appia held their fingers above their respective triggers. On my mark, everyone, Rulon called out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark! The Resonance Cascade opened fire. All 6 of her Sea-Whiz cannons opened up, firing a continuous stream of tungsten armor-penetrating rounds until all 6 ammo drums were depleted. 5,700 rounds flew away into the darkness of space, while the Resonance Cascade shot backwards at high speed, pushed along by the force of her own weapons. That's it, Cantor said. Sensors show a good birdshot pattern in a highly elliptical orbit. Stand down battle stations and start reloading the Sea-Whiz cannons. Shepminter, set in an intercept course with the Volunteer. Selborn, deploy Utility Drone 2. I want to see our handiwork. 15 hours went by. Trig was so anxious that he did not sleep. The images from his nightmare were still too raw, too fresh. He did not want to see Tenna suffering like that again. If he had his way, Trig would never lay eyes on a set of wall hooks again, either. Caldorix and her escort fleet emerged from hyperspace. Looking through the drone sensor feed, Trig could see the Khan's flagship, along with 5 smaller destroyers traveling ahead of the flagship in a screen. Rulon examined the sensors display and double-checked the ship's clock. We're on track for impact, Rulon said. In 10, 9, 8... They're going evasive. 3, 2, and... We got one! A destroyer broke formation and began to tumble. Trig could see a cloud of tiny metal fragments billowing out from the warship, obscuring it from view. Captain Cantor examined the drone feed. I can see the interior decks from here, Cantor remarked. He must have gotten hit by at least a dozen rounds. All right, the formation is breaking up now. 2 destroyers are staying behind to render aid. 2 more are staying close to Caldorix. Do you think they know they were attacked? Selborn asked. They must have figured it out by now, Ponico remarked. I can see energy spikes on the sensors. They'll find our utility drone and kill it in a few moments. Sure enough, only a few minutes went by before the Caldorix turned, facing toward the utility drone. 2 points of light shot out from the old warship and began to grow brighter. Looks like they fired torpedoes at our drone, Trig said. Keep the feed on, Rulon said, examining the video and sensor data closely. I bet we can figure out what type of warhead Caldorix uses on her torpedoes. Any intel is good intel. The torpedoes rocketed through space, killing their main engines and using cold gas thrusters to correct their trajectories. After a few minutes, the warheads detonated, and the data feed from the drone was lost. Rulon drummed his fingers on the tabletop. The tactical officer mused. Those torpedoes got very close before detonating. Came within 12 to 1,500 meters. Captain, I think those torps were using neutron warheads. Neutron warheads? Trig repeated. A type of nuclear weapon, Anfel explained. Low blast yield, but massive amounts of radiation. One of those torpedoes could kill everyone on the Cascade, but the ship itself would be salvageable. Rulon, make a note of the enemy's torpedo capabilities, Cantor said. We need all of the intel we can get. Everyone else, prepare for interception with the Eventide Volunteer. We still have to get rid of those remaining escorts before we can board Caldorix. There was so much psionic energy swirling about the harem chamber that the room had taken on an indigo hue. Shrouded in these strange energies, Tenna was curled up in the middle of the giant bed. And she was not alone. A huge Nagyari man was sitting on the bed with her. Tenna sat in the man's lap as he gently stroked her hair. Like all other members of his species, this man was completely hairless and had wide, pointed ears. In the low light, his yellow eyes contrasted sharply against the blue and silver trim of his flight suit. "I feel like I betrayed him," Tenna whispered. "I helped Alex set a trap for Trig. If he gets hurt, it'll be my fault." "Never," whispered Malum Ralpakin. "You were under duress, threatened with harm. My son is a kind and forgiving soul. He will not see your action as betrayal." Tenna let out a stifled sob and buried her face in Malum's chest. "I'm the worst. Trig would never love me now." Malum gently put one arm around Tenna's shoulder and pulled her in close. "You lie to yourself. You are a wonderful girl, worthy of my son's love, worthy of my love." Feeling better, Tenna fell asleep in Malum's arms. As soon as Tenna lost consciousness, the telepathic illusion broke. The great Khan faded away, Tenna slumped into her pillows, and the bedchamber returned to its normal colors. Out in the hallway, Alex Camber stopped projecting psionic energy and allowed one of his telepaths to take over. Alex stepped away, leaving his men with a parting statement. "She is about to break. Do not relent."